My name is Sean, and tonight's part two. And tonight we're going to focus a lot on the rhinestone features. All right. So, again, we're just going to kind of design while we're going over some of our rhinestone features. So, the first design we're going to do is just one of our live templates. And you might have seen this before, but we're going to kind of just add a simple rhinestone accent to a live templates. So what we're going to do is just go to our live template volume 3, and I'm just going to go ahead and choose one of these designs with rhinestone. So I'll use one. We've used it a few times, and the reason I like using this one is because it gets to show you how this image is going to be cropped out and how to use that magic boundary tool we covered last week. So we did cover a lot of the live templates and some of the magic boundary last week, so that one has been uploaded, so you can go back and watch any of that. I'm not going to try to cover too much of last week just so we can get through tonight, but if you guys have any questions on anything, feel free to ask. So go ahead and close this for now. So the first thing we always want to do with our live templates is edit them. So we'll just go ahead and change the name up real quick. So I'm just going to hit Find Text. And for Brain River, I can go ahead and just select Brain River. And I can just type out my new school. Sorry, my computer's on a little delay. There we go. Lakewood. And then we'll just do Mustangs at the bottom. And we can leave it as our soccer design. So when we're working with these live templates, excuse me, we can go ahead and add an accent around these designs just to add a little bit of rhinestones. So instead of it doing a complete rhinestone shirt, this is a quick way just to add, $5 to $7 in value to your t-shirt by only adding about 20 to 50 cents worth of cost on your end. So we're going to go ahead and open up our design wizard. And what I'm going to do is select the soccer ball. And I'll go ahead and change the color real quick just so we can see. And I'm going to come up here to our TRW toolbar and I'm going to create a boundary. And what that does is it goes to the outside of my soccer ball and just makes a boundary around it. So in this case, it's pretty much a perfect circle. So I'm going to go ahead and make that orange so we can see it. Once I add this boundary, the reason I'm adding this boundary is because if I tell this soccer ball, or if I tell the software that I want to add rhinestones to the outside of this design, I can say one island to the outside, add stones. I can do my contour as auto and my fill space as auto. Just select my soccer ball and I'll go ahead and move it over here for a second. And I'm just going to click island fill. So what that does is it goes to the outside of every part of this vector. So it's reading this area in here as the outside of that line. So it's going to go ahead and fill every area or open area you see in this soccer ball. So instead what we want is simply this kind of outside path just to the outside. So to do that, we're going to just add our boundary. And again, I'll make that orange so we can see. And we're going to select our boundary now, hit island fill, and now that circle, let me go ahead and clear my path, is just going to go to the outside of that soccer ball rather than fill all these objects inside of it. And one of the reasons we don't want to fill the inside is just because it's more work. And now the second reason is once I cut this pre-cut, if I use any perfect circle shapes like this soccer ball, now all I have to do is click change artwork, go back to my sports template, and I switch it out with my basketball now, it's going to fit perfect. So if I'm always using this design around or at that almost 10 inches, 9.9, actually it's closer to 9.7 once I remove that. So if I'm always using this design that's 9.7, I can use this pre-cut once for any object I use in here that's a perfect circle. So that's kind of the two reasons we want to use this magic boundary instead of going inside this whole soccer ball. So we'll go ahead and add our boundary again. Get back to that point where we are at. So it's going to add the boundary to the top layer. So the first thing we want to do is move this behind the soccer ball. Because the reason is we're going to use this magic boundary. We used it last week to clear the area around this object. So we need to clear this area all around here so our rhinestones will fit right inside there. So if my boundary is on top of this soccer ball, it's going to think it needs to clear the soccer ball too. So what we want to do first is on our design wizard right here, at the bottom you'll see this B. When I click that, it will just move it to the back of my page, the most back layer on this page. Once it's behind it, I simply grab it again. So I'm selecting the orange, holding shift and selecting the green soccer ball. So now I have both of those objects selected, and now I'm going to move them back to the front layer. And what that does now is puts this soccer ball on the top layer, so you can see when I move it over any of this text field, it's at the top layer. So now I'm going to use this orange boundary to clear out everything behind it. So when we're working with rhinestones, when we're using it for a design like this, our magic boundary number for SS10, and that you'll see our SS10 up here. So here's the drop down for all of our stones. When we're using SS10 stones, our magic boundary number is going to be 0.17. So I'm just going to click remove shapes behind. Now, if I don't want this soccer ball cut into, or the soccer text, I can go ahead and move that down. And then I can move it back up after I apply the boundary. So you'll see in this area right here, when I click magic boundary, let's go ahead and edit the text first, merge 3 color. So now in this area, and from last week, does everyone know why when I just clicked this magic boundary that my whole design disappeared like that? Alright, so the reason my design disappeared like that, and no problem. So the reason my design disappeared like that is because I used the magic boundary tool when there are still contours in my design. And so this contour around my text fields up here are still there. So before we add any magic boundary, we always have to, either break apart our effects or use our merge 3 color live text. So once I highlight this 3 color live text, hit my merge 3 color live text button, now my contours have been removed. So when I apply my magic boundary now, you can see how it cuts right in there just like it's supposed to. So, hey Mary, how are you doing tonight? So if you run into that issue when you're using any of these templates and they somehow disappear on you, that's probably why. It's just there's a contour in there that we have to clear out. So now, once I have this magic boundary applied, I can go ahead and select that circle again. I'm going to go to the Place and Fill tab. That's going to be our rhinestone area. We're going to do outside because we want it to the outside. We're going to click Add Stones. If we don't have that checked, it's just going to add like a vector outline. It's not going to have stones with it. We're going to click One Island. Islands is pretty much the rows. So if it says one island or 2 islands, that means 1 or 2 rows. The space most likely will always be around that 0.02, so you're not going to edit this too much. The contour and fill line both have these auto buttons right next to it. So if we're doing something to the outside of an object, like we want the stones to go around this object but not on top of it, all you have to do is click auto and auto. Choose the stone size you want to use, and it will auto-populate this area for you and know to put it right outside whatever object we have selected. So once we have that, all those entered, we're going to select our circle, hit Island Fill, and you'll see those stones will fit perfectly in that area because we use that 0.17 number. Right? So when we add the stones, it's going to be on a path. You can see how all these stones are connected by that line. So if I try to grab one stone, it's going to grab them all. Or you might see something like this where I add the stones and now my design's gone. The reason why is it's because that line you see is actually an object too. So as soon as I hit clear path, it'll disappear and get rid of that object, and then you'll actually see the image behind your rhinestones. So it's just like a white, almost like a white vector. So if I hit this X at the top right here, it gets rid of the color fill, so then you'll see your design right through it. So it's just, you could pretty much change this to whatever color you wanted. Once you hit clear path, highlight, hit clear path, it will disappear. So now we've added a nice rhinestone accent to this design. Let's go ahead and we'll make all these the same color. And we can make these some crystal stones. So now when I put this in my calculator, you'll see that we have about 57 stones in this design with about $16 or 16 cents worth of stones in this design. So once we add that ring of rhinestones, we can add anywhere, depending on our market, anywhere from $3 to $7 just for adding a little rhinestone accent. Any questions on our first design? All right, we'll keep moving. So our next one, what we're going to do is pretty much design these ones from scratch. Now, we have a lot of fonts. We have a lot of fonts that are that you can purchase off our site that will already give you designs or fonts or text rhinestoned out. But a lot of times we'll maybe just want to have text and outline them with stones, or we can even create our own rhinestone text, but it's not going to work as a font, but we can create any font kind of into a rhinestone pattern too. Perfect. Yeah, so we had some questions about using the path, when to use the path, hatch, island, and offset. So I'll kind of go over that a little bit as well. Hey Jerry, how you doing tonight? So real quick, we'll just go a little bit over the path, island, hatch fill, and offset. So the path fill, what that's going to do is whatever shape your object is, pretty much those lines that you see, it will just follow that path. Now, there are tools on our software. You can see on this corner here, when I hit path fill, this one doesn't look too good. This one doesn't look good. These two are okay. But same button, or same thing with, now we're going to add our corner detect. And you can see how all those corners are perfect now. So when we have any type of object that has sharp corners, whether it be a text, a box like we just drew, or any type of shape that has a lot of sharp edges to it, we're going to use the corner detect. And when I create the next design, I'll show you a little bit too of how this is going to save you a lot of time when we're going back to edit these designs. So a path fill, again, is just going to go around the outside of your design. So if you have any type of text, let's go ahead and make this like impact's a good one. So we have our text field here. I can almost, this is a good way to show you too with the different text, just to see all the different fills. So on the path fill, it's just going to be simply to the outside. Now we do want to have the corner detect because you can see how sharp these angles are in the letters. So if I don't have that on, it still adds a path fill. It's not going to get rid of that inside text, but as soon as we hit the clear paths, it will do that for us. But now look at all the edges around this design and how much work we're going to have to go back to move all these stones. So just by simply clicking this corner detect, path fill, all that work is done for us. Now one thing is, when we use this path fill, or sorry, this corner detect, what it does is every corner it hits, it stops and starts. So every corner we have, you'll see an overlap of stones. So on each corner, there's going to be a duplicate stone. Exactly. So Pillar already mentioned on that, we'll do a merge overlap, and we'll get to that when we're really designing on how to use these tools here to, again, help you with your rhinestone designs. Because it's not going to be a perfect fill. It's going to be a great head start. But you'll see down here, we have a lot of overlapping stones. So one quick way to fix that would be our merge overlap. And that's just going to make those merge right into each other. So we'll get through that on quick editing. But for now, that's going to be our path fill. Next is our hatch fill. So in a text style like we have here, that's a lot bulkier and blockier. So like a college font, stuff like that. Those are going to work really well with the hatch fill, because the hatch fill is just going to pretty much go just left to right and fill it with stones the best it can. So it's not going to be able to shape to like a circle. And I'll show you, we'll do one with the text and one with the circle to demonstrate why you won't want to use a hatch fill if you have a very like rounded object or text. So here we have our TRW font. I'm going to hit hatch fill. And what that does is just put my stones left to right. So you can see when it runs out of room, let me go ahead and get rid of my background color so you can see a little bit better. When it runs out of room, it doesn't finish the design. So it's a great start. You know, it's pretty quick with these block letters. But you kind of have to go up here and maybe finish this R. And you can see when it gets down to these points here, it's not, it is rounded in some sense, but there's a lot of area or gaps between these stones on the edges. And again, with this circle, if I did a hatch fill, you can see pretty much once it gets to the top of these objects and the bottom, like look how much room you have between each one of those stones. So if I delete that, you know, it takes on the rounded shape, but towards the bottom areas, you'll see you have a lot of problems. So to get rid of those lines on a hatch fill, that's the same thing as the clear path. So if you hit clear path, all those lines will disappear. Now, if you're doing a hatch fill and you go back, you'll see when the wizard does like the hatch fill step, what it does first is finds your objects, lays these lines across all of them, and then adds the stones to it. So if you go back on a design you've added hatch fill to, you will have to click undo a few times, and then you'll see those lines disappear too. And if you don't click add stones and you click hatch fill, it's just going to throw all those lines across your design. So the last one we have, so the offset we'll go over a little bit, but the three main fill ones, we're going to use these three. The offset's going to be for more of like a curved line. So if I have like a line like this or unique shape and I want stones, got to make sure we hit add stones. If I want stones to fill or follow that line perfectly, that's what the offset's going to be for. So sometimes if if I were to do an island fill, that's what it's going to give me. So instead of filling around a whole object, sometimes with those island fills, it can get a little kind of wonky towards the ends. So the offset will fill perfectly. So I'll show you again. Sometimes when we add a few islands, you'll really see the difference. So this one on the left will use the offset, and then the one on the right will use the island fill. So the island fill doesn't look too bad, but towards this area here you can see it gets a little bit off, where the offset is perfect throughout the entire design on those kind of curved objects. Excuse me. So that's kind of when you'll use the offset fill. Now, and for the offset, you can see right now it's set to the outside, so it kind of went to above this line. If I was set it to the inside and I did the same thing, it's going to go to the opposite side of that line. So that's your inside outside is more of how it's going to fill either to the top or bottom or left or right of that line. So we had a question on sometimes when I do an island fill I get two rows. Why? That could be because of how it's reading the text. So let's say I just have the letter S here and I do an island fill. Oh, let's go ahead and do it to the outside one. I'd have to see. Sometimes when I do the island, I get two. I have to see how you're doing, how you have it set up. Oh, okay. So the reason might be if you don't have, so if you don't have this auto set, if it's set to 0, let's see if it does it then. Yeah. So when it's not set to 0, it's creating the line as the island fill and then going around it. So if you just add any type of contour spacing to this line, it should just not do that. It should just give you the one line. Thanks, Pillar. All right, perfect. So last we have our island fill, and that's going to be used. Now, you can almost use the island as like a universal fill. It kind of works for a lot, even if it's like a bulkier font like we have here. But anything like rounded like a circle or a round font or a unique shape, usually we'll use the island fill to fill that. And that's just going to go through the whole design and fill it the best it can. So it's going to start from the inside and work its way, or start from the outside and work its way in. So if we have this text here and we want to fill the inside of this object, all I do is hit 0, inside. Our contour spacing we can set to auto, or you might have to play around. This is where you might play around with your contour spacing because we're going to the inside of it. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So we're going to have our design here. I'll make 2 copies. So I do an island fill. Oh, let me change my stone color up. So I'm going to do an island fill. And you'll see how it goes through the entire design and tries to fill it the best it can. Now, sometimes you'll see little areas like this. All this means is it could not fit another row of stones in here, so it stopped filling that area. So with our contour spacing, if I play around with this, if I increase it maybe to 0.01 or 0.10, hit island fill, you'll see how it fills it. That one actually got a little bit worse, so maybe let's try it smaller. So now it gave me that line on the inside. It's a double row, but I could use my magic, my merge overlap to help fix that. So sometimes playing with the contour spacing, you'll see different results in your fill. And that's how you can go back or make it a little bit easier when you're editing these designs. So a lot of times what we're going to do is kind of play around with that where it makes it easier for us. So maybe even a little bit less. And now the R is filled up a little bit more. So once I won't go too much into editing these type of designs right now, just because we have a couple we're going to do this on. But when you see something like this where it's, you know, not completely filled, this is a pretty quick fix with the wizard. We're just going to hit our clear paths. And all we'll have to do is, let's say we want to start merging or getting these lines so they're all the way across. We have our respace tool. So I'm able to start at this end and hold shift and click on each stone. Click my respace stones button that's right here at the bottom. And that will make them go respace equally between each stone. And then we have this down and up arrow. So if I just add one stone, now that row is fixed. So you'll go through here pretty quickly. And once you start doing it a few times, it gets pretty quick. I'll add one stone. And you'll see kind of when you get to the bottom that you might not be able to add one stone. This one worked pretty well still. Because there's too much, or there's too little room. But these ones work pretty well still. Let's try this line here. Got a little less room. But if I added one more stone, you can see if we have something like that, our stones are way too close. So we would just go through this design and kind of respace those real quick, and then our design would be looking pretty good. All right. So does that help with the path, hatch, island, and offset? Awesome. Yeah, so pretty much exactly what you said. You pretty much are going to go in the order of filling out all your information first, applying some type of fill, whether it be the path, hatch, island, or offset, and then once you apply it, hit the clear paths, and then you'll be able to edit all your stones. Because otherwise, when you try to grab it, if you see like it grab an entire row of stones like that, that just means we haven't cleared our path. So once I do that, each one of those stones would be an individual stone. Alright, so now what we're going to do is incorporate these rhinestones with a design. So we'll just go ahead and create a quick design. So the first one, we're using this Pacifico font. And I'm just going to write out baseball, and then mom, just like that. So we have pretty much our design set up. Now, the thing with rhinestones is when we have our design, we have to size everything up first. So if my overall design right now is 8.2, unless I add, you know, it'll go a little bit wider than this because we're going to add an outline of stones. But otherwise, we can't change. Once I apply the stones to this design, I can't resize it like I could a vector design. So if I kept this a vector, if I need it for a decal, I can make it a decal size. If I want it for a 3X t-shirt, I can make it for a 3X t-shirt. When we're using rhinestones, we have to find that size first. So if we know this is for, you know, maybe a baseball mom, so this might be anywhere from a medium to an extra large shirt, then we can make it probably a generic, you know, 8.5 to 9.5 inch shirt, and it's going to work fine for any of those. So we'll size it kind of generic so it can fit, you know, 2 to 3 shirt sizes or more. And then we're going to add our stones. So on this one, we're going to keep the text on the the actual vector text on the inside too. So we want to add a rhinestone outline to this design. So kind of with that just basic, path, hatch, island, fill, and offset, which one do you think we're going to use to apply just an outline of stones around our design? Yes, so few people are, yep, more and more coming in. So it's we're going to use the island fill. So the island fill is just going to go to and yes, we are going to set it to the outside. So we're going to run through this real quick. So each time we're applying or we open up our design wizard, these are going to pretty much be, you'll see these presets in here. So all the islands and everything's pretty much going to be set to 0. Lucky guess. So we're going to change it to 1 because, again, that's 1 row of stones. Well, islands is rows of stones. So we want 1 row or 1 island. Next, or first we're going to go outside, add stones, and then we're going to tell it 1 island. Next, we're going to change our contour space because if I set this to auto, it's going to know to go right outside this text line. It's perfect. I don't need to adjust it. I just need to make sure I'm using SS10 or whatever size stone I'm going to use for this project. So we just need to make sure we adjust this first, and then our contour and fill line space is just going to be set to auto. All right. Now, with this design too, I'm going to go ahead and weld my text. And I'm going to show you why this corner detect is important again. Because if I hit island fill now, check out all these tight areas in my designs. So someone asked, does it need to be changed to curves? I would weld first, which in turn would convert it to curves. When you weld an object, it automatically converts it to curves. The reason we don't want to convert to curves is because our text right now, let me go back. If I just convert this to curves, this is a script font, so you can see how all those letters overlap. So if I just hit convert to curves, those overlaps are still going to be there. So by welding that instead, all those overlapping pieces will just kind of flow into one. And that's how, and by doing that, it converts it to curves too. So now it's not in a text form anymore. It's just reading it as an object. Right. So without the corner detect, even on a design like this, there is a lot of, it's not too many sharp corners or edges, but when we get down to these little areas here, pretty much where all the letters connect, we run into a lot of areas where we're going to have to go back and fix it. Now we also have 2 choices too. Do you guys like how the rhinestones are inside of all these letters, or do you want it so these letters aren't filled with stones? So essentially it would look the O would be filled in like this instead. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's a little much when they are filled. It can be distracting. So if you like the rhinestones inside of it, which sometimes it does look good, you can leave it pretty much with the settings that we just did, and you'll just go back and clean those areas out. Now, with our main design, what we're going to do here is, I already have it all welded together. So instead, what we're going to do is use that create boundary that we used on that first design. When I create this boundary, that's my object now. So you don't have all these areas that are filled in. Now this capital B is. So this area will be filled because it's not a closed-in object. But now, by doing this, it's not going to be able to fill all those areas to the inside. So it's going to save us a lot of time, and I kind of think it looks better too. Now, yeah, so someone asked, how do you decide when to do that? You know, you can kind of, if you have a way to quickly show your customer, you could, or I would just probably recommend that we don't add stones in between each letter. But if they, you know, if they want all the stones in it, then we can just do it the original way. But, you know, just let your customer know that, you know, these, we can add stones in these areas. Sometimes it doesn't look as good. So whatever they prefer is how I would probably try to set it up. But I would try to explain to them that it's going to probably look better in the end without them there. And that way it will save you the hassle of, you know, having to place or, you know, clean out all those areas. So again, create boundary. And then when I create that boundary, it completely fills all those areas. So now, when I come back to the hatch or the island fill, I'm going to select my corner detect. Let's go ahead and just change the color up so we can see it. And now I'm going to hit island fill. So just like that, it's going to add all my stones. Actually, let's go ahead. I don't like making the outside fill red. Even if it is going to be eventually be red stones, we can always change that. The reason I don't like to make those outside stones red when we're designing is because our overlap tools are going to mark everything red. So if you have two shades of red, it makes it very hard, you know, difficult to see all that. So we'll change, we'll use just any color. It doesn't really matter when we're setting it up. This is just for us to, you know, clean it and see everything. So we'll go ahead and clear our pass. And now we can use our stone tools down here to help clean up our design, because you'll see there's going to be overlapping areas that might have a little bit bigger of a gap. So now we're going to go clean all that up. To copy the font before, you can just do a Control-C, Control-V. And then I just moved it. So to grab all, I don't want to highlight my entire design. What I'm going to do is just select one stone, come up top here, and it's going to select all the objects that are the same size, which will be all the stones we just added. And then I'm going to use my different tools down here to fix my design. So I'll make a couple copies just so we can see this, the different effects. So the first one, and actually make all these different colors just so it won't grab the same stone. So here I'm going to grab all my gold stones, and I'm going to do a mark top. So a mark top overlap. So all the stones that are layered on top will be marked red. So it's going to show me all those stones. So I do this two different ways. One, you can just, it's going to not only highlight, but it's going to grab all the red stones. So I can just simply click on them, drag, and delete. The reason I, excuse me, I tend not to do that as much is because then it goes in and leaves some areas or some bigger gaps through the design. This one doesn't look too bad. This one actually worked pretty well. But like up here on the E, you can see how spaced this is now. The A has a little space. So it definitely did a pretty good job on this one. But sometimes you'll see little areas like that that will have quite a bit of like air, you know, extra room in it. But that's going to be a quick fix with our software. So something like this really isn't that bad, but again, maybe in this M you'll see a little bit more how sometimes it will take a whole, you know, I can quickly go back and then just drop a stone in there though. So that's how quick some of these fixes will be. It'll just be a quick nudge. Now another way to do this is we're going to do the same thing me grab all my red or green stones this time. And I'm just going to do a marked bottom. The reason I don't like to do a marked bottom is because if a stone is overlapping completely, like this one here, you don't see it necessarily. So if I just wanted to mark these red just so I could see which ones were overlapping, because sometimes it's just a quick fix of nudging this rather than deleting it completely. So this is what I tend to do, but with the top overlap, is I'll mark them, and let me go back. So when I'm doing my top overlap, what I tend to do instead is go through my design, and if it's just a little area like this, I'll nudge it. If I know, and I can quickly just switch it back to the original color, if I see a red dot that's completely just, I don't see anything overlapping or touching it, I know it's just a straight overlap or just right on top of the other one because I did that corner detect. So every time it hits a corner, it's going to start a new line. So those ones are always going to be overlapping. If I see something like this, it's just a quick nudge, and then I can turn that back to the topaz, and I don't have any overlapping stones. This is a complete overlap, so I'm going to leave that red. That way when I need to edit these, or when I want to remove all those overlapping stones, I can just select all the red stones and take them out all at once. So here I would just go through my design, you know, with this stone here, maybe just nudge it a little. Change the color back. This one I'm not worried about. This one, this one, this one is just, they're straight overlaps. So that's a great question. Someone asked, how close can you leave the stones before the magic flock becomes an issue? There's no perfect distance. We use that 0.02 spacing because it's a safe distance. I tend to do, you don't want to go too close. Something like this is probably about as close as you really want to get without pushing it. If you know your stones are going to be close in some areas like this, when you do go to weed it, you just want to be very careful when you're weeding that section. But there's no perfect spacing. So what you can do here to help, if you're not sure and you want to make, and that's the thing too, we're going to, in our next design, I'll show you. This spacing you can set. So right now we have this space, the minimum distance between the stones is set to 0. So what this means when it's set to 0 is that they literally have to be touching each other to register a red dot or to show that it's overlapping. Now, to get to the screen, you right click any 3 of these buttons. If I set to this to 0.02, and that's the spacing I usually want between the stones, if I select this design now and click the same button, look how many stones turn red. But this is clearly enough to get us through or to work fine with our design. So if there's a design you're not sure about, you can set this threshold a little bit higher just to make sure these stones aren't touching. Because sometimes when you're designing with stones, this is way too close for a magic flock. But if this is set to 0, and I highlight this section, it's never going to come up as a red dot. So if I don't physically see this when I'm going through my design, then I'm going to have an issue there. When I do my first cut, I'm going to finally realize, oh, those stones are really close, and I'll have to manually go back to, move them. So you might want to set this to, 0.01, maybe something in between that, just in case there is something too close. When you go to when you click these buttons, it's still going to register that these are really close together. And then it will help, you'll just go through your design and maybe just nudge those over a bit like that. Now someone also asked, how do you switch the colors so quickly? If you have light taupe, it's gonna, whatever stone I click last, it's gonna show in this area up top here. So I usually, once I have that light topaz selected, if you select a red stone and just double click this box, it'll just make that go right to our light topaz color or whatever color we have in here. So once we would go through and edit everything like that, we would just leave our red stones behind. And that's when I could select all the same color and remove all those red stones at once. So lastly, we did our merge. So the mark top and mark bottom are essentially the same. One's just going to mark the bottom stones red. One's going to mark the top stones red. I prefer the top because then it doesn't hide any of those bottom stones for you. But, you know, each one is almost going to be the same tool. And then lastly, we have our merge overlapping stone. So what that does is it just simply, wherever it has overlapping stones, like right here, it just merges them into one. So it finds that center point in between them and then just goes ahead and merges it into one. So when you do this merge overlap, it's usually pretty nice because you don't have to go back and edit too much. The one thing we will edit with the merge overlap is usually the spacing between all the stones. So you can see here, because we merge those stones, it sometimes pulls them away from another one, and we get kind of areas like this. So once we have this merge overlap done, which I tend to use a little bit, we'll get rid of our top layer, and we're just going to go through our design and make sure all the spacing is equal. So this is going to, you know, over time you'll start seeing quicker, like rhinestone areas a little bit quicker. So I can kind of know that I could fit just an extra stone right there, and now that area is fixed. All right, so right here, we might try to just move this stone here, make a copy, and then just drop one right there. So that's a quick fix for something like that. Now, when we get to an area where, you know, right here, we just have a little extra space where it just looks just a little bit off, this is where we're going to use our respacing tool to fix all that. So you can just select the stones in that path or line. You don't have to do an entire line, just, you know, 8 to 10 stones, just something quick like that. Hit my respace, and now that looks a little bit cleaner going that way. And then I can do the same thing going this way. Respace. And now those just match up a little bit nicer. So if I want to go down in this area, I'd probably just manually fix this area up. If I wanted it so those stones kind of didn't go down here because none of my other areas are filled, I could almost stop it at this point up top here and just kind of get rid of those stones too. When it tends to fill like this, I think it looks a little bit better to fill it. We're not going to fill those areas, but at least kind of something like that will fill it up a little bit more. All right, so same thing here. Sometimes it might just look like it's not respaced, but again, there's really nothing we can do in that area. When we use the respacing tool, when I add that line, I can add a stone to that path just by clicking up on the arrow or down on the arrow. So I might be able to get one in there. It does make the spacing a little bit different from the rest of my design, but that might end up looking a little bit nicer, just tighter spacing than having all that gap. So our A right here, we can clearly see we have some spacing issues, so we'll just go down to this bottom one, respace, maybe try to add a stone, and then we're done. So same thing going up this line. We don't need to grab too many. Respace, try to add a stone, and we're good. So we'll just kind of continue that throughout our entire design. So, you know, something like this area here, We obviously have some spacing issues, so I can just select. And I try to go from to edge. And what I mean by that is this little point here to this point here, it's a nice curved line. If I start taking in too much, these little parts where we have like the corner detect where it fills it nicely, it sometimes can start throwing that off. So if I start adding too many stones, you can see how those little areas like here don't really line up too much or too well anymore. So what we want to do instead is more start at a point like that and end at a point. So this might be a little bit more tedious to clean up this bottom area because we only want to go kind of point to point like that, but it's going to look a lot better at the end. And once we add these lines, I can just click on them. Or, sorry, these paths. I can click on them. And this is probably a little too close for the magic flock. I'd probably take one stone out of this path just so I don't run into any issues. The software is not, the only way the software is going to tell you if it's too close is by using your merge overlaps and setting it to like 0.01 or even like 0.005. I would do something like that, and that will at least let you know if the stones are too close, because again, if they're not touching and it's set to 0, you could have it almost set up just like that or as close as you could, and as long as those aren't touching, it won't show up red. But if I have that even set to like 0.005, it will show up and I can come back and manually just move that. Alright, so then we'll have our design just like that, and then I could go ahead and to finish it off, I could bring in a clip art, bring in my baseball, size that up to fit right in there. And to customize this, we can always just add a number and then just throw it right in our baseball. So when we're done, now we can make our design, maybe magic glitter, make that red or blue, make our stones white, ball red, and our text blue as well. And now we have our finished design. Now if I want to show this real quick or just to see how it looks, and look, I didn't edit this one completely just because I wanted to get through at least some of the next design. But we'd want to go through all these areas and respace anything like that. But if I want to see this design real quick with the stones and how they'll look, I can now go to my mockups. Right here on the left, it's almost grayed out, but if you hover over it, it's the middle buttons. That's going to be the simulate stones button. So when I left click, you'll see how all those stones will turn into actual rhinestones. And so I can show that to my customer, I print that out, and now it actually shows them with rhinestones. We don't want to save it like this because it actually puts a layer on top of our old one. So if we want to show them that or just see how it looks, because this looks a lot better than just having our white stones like that. You know, you don't really get to see the full effect until you actually do add those rhinestone colors. So you can either do an undo real quick, or if you've applied those stones, you just highlight your design again. This time hold shift and then click that stone, and then it will remove them. All right, so we're gonna go through our next design pretty quick. Most likely what we're gonna do is add that webinar next week too, so obviously anyone in here will know. But what I'll do is I'll probably make it for either Monday or Tuesday of next week, just because we do leave for a show. So I'll probably aim for like Monday night, and we'll just almost do like a part 3 with this. Anyone that's already bought part 2 will have the new registration though. The shift button, what that does is when you have this in your rhinestone format, like once I've already added or clicked the simulate stones button, if you hold shift and click it again, it will get rid of those stones. I couldn't get the link for part 1. Did anyone else have problems with the link for part 1? Okay, I'll double check on it. Looks like one person had trouble with it. A couple said they didn't. I'll double check on it just to make sure. There is like a PDF in a Word document form. Do you know which one you opened that you had trouble with? And while we're doing that, I'm going to start typing out our next design. I'll check them both and see if there's any issues. So if you purchase part 1, it should just be right in your if you purchase part 1, the link will be in your download files. Otherwise, you will need to purchase part 1 too, and then you'll see the link for that. Okay, all right, Tabitha, I'll definitely check on that, and if not, I'm gonna write your name down now, and I will just personally send you the link. Okay. All right. So on this one, what we're going to do is we're going to write out birthday. And we're just going to use kind of like a bubbly font. So this one is Baloo or Baluda. Not sure how to exactly say that, but that's going to be the font right here. And we're just going to size that a little bit, make it a little bit taller. And down here, I'm just going to write out princess. And once I have those set up, again, we want to make sure that we're sizing our design first before we add stones, because if we just write this out and it's 7 inches and our shirt needed to be 8.5, 9, then we're going back and redoing this entire design. So let's size it out first. Let's say, maybe it's for a kid's shirt or a smaller shirt, so we're only going to do 8 inches wide on this one. So once I have that set up, I'm just going to add a slight envelope to the birthday to lift it up, and then a slight envelope for princess just to bring it down. The reason I don't want to go too crazy with these envelopes is because if I make it like this, the more of the arc there is, the harder it's going to be to finish or stone out your design. All right, so I'll go through this one pretty quick. Again, we're going to finish this one up next week just because I know Matt's going to go live around like 9:45, so I want to make sure you guys don't miss any of that. So we'll add on to this for next week as well. So on this one, we already went over the path fill. So that's all we're doing on this one. We're just clicking path fill. Now, if you see this when you add a path fill where some of these, it still has the text behind some of those designs, don't worry, you still did it okay. You just have to hit clear pass, and then you'll see all that go away. So when we have our design and we add that envelope to it, and I'll do the same text here, usually the more arc we have, that one actually didn't turn out too bad. It sometimes around these edges can get messier. So we tend not to add too much of an arc because that's when, like over here, you'll see how all these stones kind of start running. They're not overlapping, but it's a lot more work because you don't see the overlaps and you have to go back and kind of move them. That's funny. So someone wrote, if Matt's going live tonight, that means it's going to cost me money. Yeah, so Sean, size the design first, then start adding the rhinestones, and then we got to amen to that. So yeah, so we want to size the design first, and then we'll add the rhinestones. So we want to, with rhinestones, we can't just like um, guess size. You know, we don't want to. We need to make sure, and we want to talk to our clients beforehand and just let them know. You know, rhinestones aren't as simple as like vector design. Once we do this, we can't go back and edit it. There will be a re-edit fee, or there will be some type of, you know, design and edit, or some type of re-edit fee, however you want to phrase it to them. So with this design, this is where I would say to definitely, if you're doing something like this, to set this to about 0.005 or 0.001, because there's gonna be a lot of areas where there's stones. These ones are actually overlapping, but something like here that they won't possibly show up if we don't do the entire overlap. So little areas like this, you know, that's not going to cut well, but it's not going to show up on a marked top overlap either. So if we increase this to, you know, 0.005 or 0.001, when I do these overlaps, it's going to show those a little bit more and help us get rid of them. So I'm just going to remove all those, go ahead and hit delete, and then I'll just go kind of quickly through here and just kind of edit it, move a couple stones. So I'm just doing a copy and paste real quick, and that's dropping those stones for me. So I'm just going to kind of edit this one pretty quick. So anywhere you see these gaps, we'll just kind of throw it in. The A has a couple. So we'll probably go this way. And we can always adjust these designs. We don't have to keep it exactly how it was set up. So something like that. I can even move that up a bit. And now that A looks a little bit nicer. Every time I try to get a mark overlapping stones, I get an error message. It could be just there's like some type of background, like the mark. If you're not clearing your paths, it might be sending you an error. If you want to send me the design you're working on, or send us the design, or just give us a call, we can make sure that you know, it's not your software, or we might just have to do a quick repair on Corel. All right, so now we'll go ahead and add this one here. Move that one just a little bit, and we got that one set up. Oh, got a couple spots over here and here. And because of the style of text, if we go a little bit outside where usually we want it nice and clean, this type of font and style doesn't have to be a perfect straight line. So it gives us a little room to kind of be quick with the edits. So something like this I can just bring down and close that off, and it looks fine. So we'll do the same thing with Princess, path fill, clear paths, mark top overlapping. Go ahead and move those out. And then we'll just go work, you know, just start at the P and work your way across. And I can even use my respacing, so I can just go right up this line here, respace that, and now that's fixed. Same thing with our R, maybe just move those ones over a bit. Add a stone in there. Bring one up top there. Start with the N. Maybe just add one in here, and then I can go back up this way for my respace. Yeah, you could definitely use the combined stones here too. Either or works fine. Honestly, it's really whatever preference you have, however you design easier is how I would approach this. So if you think it's easier to combine the stones at first and then go back and edit it, I would just set it up that way. If you like to, you know, see all the overlapping areas first and then edit it, you know, you can set it up that way too. So now I have that set up. The last part, we're just going to go to our TRW Live templates. I'm going to go ahead and add our artwork. So this is going to come from our Kids Pack Volume 2. And we're just going to search crown. It's already there. You guys can see I was practicing. And we're going to just select our crown. And I'm just going to space it or set it up right in the middle. If I want, I can even add an envelope. And just move that up just like that. Put it right in the middle. And go ahead and add a little bit of color to our design. So I can change those to the pink. And maybe a little blue crown or purple. And then lastly, just to customize it, you can throw in a number 9 or whatever age they're turning. Right into the middle of the crown. You know, whatever font looks nice, we'll just throw that in there. And just like that, we have a custom birthday princess design.